First, fresh protests have broken out today in Kamwokya, in Uganda's capital, Kampala. Police have arrested at least 7 people and have managed to quell the demonstrations. Well, these were the scenes earlier. Protesters setting fires and blocked roads. They're angry about the continued detention of a former resident, the popular MP Bobi Wine. Mr. Wine is in custody after appearing at a military court yesterday. He was charged with firearms offences. Now, his lawyers say that he had been beaten so badly he was unable to sit, speak or even stand. Well, the level of violence used in the run-up to the Arua by-election has drawn international condemnation. Earlier today, EU officials said that there was no room for repression or violence in a modern, democratic Uganda, whilst the United States said that detainees have the right to humane treatment, due process and access to lawyers and, of course, to their families. But that was something that Mr. Wine had not been granted until today, when his wife and his brother were finally allowed to pay him a visit. Well, we've edited some of the interview and the images you're about to see here, but some of you may still find it distressing.
He knelt down and he put his hands up. He said, "I'm not going to fight anyone, I'm innocent." And by the word innocent, he had a sound of the iron bones on top of his head, which made him fall on the ground. I think by the time he fell on the ground, he hit his nose down and started bleeding. And I think that looked as a catch-up to these guys, because that was the beginning of a beating. He says they shared him like a scavenger. As one man was holding one of the toys, breaking it, almost to bring the bone out, another one was holding a finger. Another one was holding a rib to pull it out manually. Another one was holding an eye. So as they all, he was not crying enough. One short man moved, he says, and another very heavy man came to him. So by the time he was half collapsed and he could only hear sounds on his way to as they were beating, until he collapsed totally. He woke up, maybe, he didn't tell me whether it was the following day or it was the day in the evening, only to find himself in a container, some kind of container chained up. So they took him somewhere and they started injecting him times that he cannot count. He says he cannot tell what was entering his body by that time. Was it medicine? Was it toxins? Was it any kind of substance? Yeah, I told him, "What do you think? Have you talked to anyone?" He shook his head and said, "Baba, can I tell you something? My body is weak, but my heart is the strongest." We're calling upon the international community, because Uganda does not live in an island. Why are you leaving Uganda alone? Why are you leaving us to die?
That was the brother of the MP, Bobi Wine, who was speaking to our correspondent, Catherine Biaruyanga, there in Kampala. Now, this gentleman here is the new face of the world's largest human rights organisation. He's from South Africa, and his name is Kumi Naidoo. He took charge of Amnesty International this week. Bigger, bolder and more inclusive. That's the target set for Amnesty by its new boss. Now, he's been speaking to Milton Nkosi, who began by asking him about South Africa's first post-apartheid mass shooting.
What do you think should happen, and particularly for President Cyril Ramaphosa here in South Africa, what do you think he should be doing to try and fix the Marikana massacre legacy?
The Marikana massacre is a terrible scar on the conscience of all South Africans, not just the failure of the government and the security forces to hold them account, because the fact is that we have not been able to pressurize government to ensure that there is accountability, to ensure that there's proper investigations, proper cases and hopefully convictions.
We saw the deaths of those 6 people on the streets of Harare following the protests of the results from this recent election, killed by the army using rifles and bayonets. What's your message to President Emmerson Mnangagwa?
As Amnesty, we're deeply disappointed that there's another election where human life is lost, where excessive force is used, where the army is drawn in. And I think that this is extremely unfortunate setback. As Amnesty, we will push really hard now for a genuinely independent inquiry into the killings of the 6 Zimbabwean citizens, because we do not want those lives to go in vain.
Uganda is another hotspot. What's your message to President Yoweri Museveni, particularly following the arrest of the Afrobeats musician Bobi Wine?
My message to President Museveni is that he should go back and look at his own history. He should look at what he was saying when he first came into power such a long time ago, right? Think about what he promised people then, and for him to understand that his obsession with clinging onto power for as long as he did is clearly harmful to the people of Uganda.
How important is it for you that both leaders of Amnesty International, right at the helm of the organization, are Africans?
In some ways, I would say it's very important that we are Africans, because humanity started on this continent. Nobody disputes that anymore. And I feel quite comfortable that I could contribute to the journey of making Amnesty a truly, truly global organization, equally owned, loved, and shared by people, whether they come from a developing country or whether they come from a developed country.
That's the new head of Amnesty International. You're watching Focus on Africa. A quick look at the other stories making headlines now. And 33 children have died in a camp for internally displaced people in northeast Nigeria. The deaths took place over a 2-week period in Bama in Borno State. The charity Doctors Without Borders blames the lack of access to shelter and health care. Police in South Africa have clashed with students in the coastal city of Durban. The protesters from the University of KwaZulu-Natal have been demonstrating over poor living conditions, including leaking roofs, broken showers and rats in kitchen areas, as well as slow Wi-Fi.